In the world of American organized crime, some figures build their reputations in public view, on streets, in courtrooms, or through headlines that follow spectacular events. Others, however, rise almost entirely in the shadows. Their names are rarely known outside law enforcement circles, yet their influence quietly shapes entire systems. Eulalio Lalo Martinez was one of those figures. Born around 1961, Martinez came of age in Southern California during a period when street gangs and prison-based organizations were becoming increasingly interconnected. Neighborhood crews no longer operated in isolation. Instead, they were tied, often invisibly, to leadership structures behind bars. At the top of that hierarchy sat the Mexican Mafia, known internally as La M, an organization that exerted control not just over prisons, but over hundreds of Hispanic street gangs throughout California. Martinez's roots trace back to Barrio Lomas Rosemead, a local gang operating in the San Gabriel Valley. Like many young men drawn into gang life during that era, his early years were shaped by loyalty, territory, and survival. But Martinez quickly distinguished himself from others. He was not known primarily as a street-level enforcer or a reckless risk-taker. Instead, he developed a reputation for discipline, patience, and an understanding of hierarchy, qualities that would later define his rise. As Martinez entered the California prison system, he stepped into an environment where street status alone meant little. Inside, power was dictated by structure, communication, and long-term strategy. The Mexican Mafia functioned as the ultimate authority, arbitrating disputes, issuing directives, and enforcing discipline among affiliated gangs. Membership and leadership were not granted lightly. They were earned through trust, reliability, and an ability to operate under pressure. Martinez adapted quickly. While incarcerated, he became identified as a shot caller for the Lomas gang, a role that placed him between street-level members and higher-ranking prison leadership. From this position, he relayed instructions, resolved conflicts, and ensured that the gang's activities aligned with broader organizational expectations. Even while physically confined, Martinez's influence began to extend outward, back into neighborhoods he could no longer walk freely. This early period established a pattern that would define his career. Martinez understood that confinement did not necessarily mean irrelevance. In fact, within the Mexican Mafia system, prison could serve as a command center. Leaders who demonstrated consistency and control were often more powerful behind bars than they ever had been on the streets. As his sentence continued, Martinez's reputation grew. He was seen as someone who followed rules, respected chain of command, and could be trusted to carry out directives without unnecessary exposure. These traits mattered deeply within an organization constantly under surveillance. Reliability was currency, and Martinez had it. At the same time, Southern California's criminal landscape was changing. Law enforcement pressure intensified, while prisons became overcrowded hubs of gang activity. Street gangs increasingly depended on prison leadership for protection, authorization, and dispute resolution. The lines between inside and outside blurred. Decisions made in cells shaped events miles away. Martinez's rise reflected this shift. He became a steady point of control in an unstable system. His ability to maintain authority over Lomas Rosemead, even as younger members cycled in and out of custody, cemented his position as a long-term leader rather than a temporary figure. By the end of this phase of his life, Martinez was no longer just a gang member serving time. He was becoming something more, a manager of people, money, and loyalty. The foundations of his power were firmly in place, built quietly and deliberately. What began as a neighborhood affiliation had evolved into a role within one of the most tightly controlled criminal organizations in the United States. And while Martinez remained physically confined, his reach was only beginning to expand. By the time Eulalio Lalo Martinez arrived at Pelican Bay State Prison, his transformation from local gang figure to prison-based authority was already well underway. Pelican Bay was designed to be the end of influence. Its security housing unit, known simply as the SHU, was built to isolate the most dangerous and powerful inmates from the rest of the prison population. Cells were windowless, contact was minimal. Communication was tightly monitored. The goal was simple: cut leaders off from their networks and watch their power fade. For Martinez and others like him, the SHU became something else entirely. Inside Pelican Bay, power did not disappear, it adapted. Influence was no longer displayed through visibility or force, but through communication and reputation. Martinez understood this environment quickly. In a place where words were restricted and movement was limited, information became the most valuable commodity of all. One of the primary tools used inside the SHU was the kite, small handwritten notes smuggled between inmates through laundry, food trays, legal paperwork, or sympathetic intermediaries. These messages were brief, coded, and carefully worded. A single kite could authorize a financial decision, resolve a dispute, or trigger consequences for someone on the outside. According to prosecutors, Martinez became highly proficient in this system. From his cell, he was alleged to have issued instructions that extended far beyond Pelican Bay's concrete walls. Orders traveled outward, through other inmates, through county jails, and eventually into Southern California, neighborhoods where affiliated gangs operated daily. Martinez's role went beyond communication. He was believed to be involved in the collection of taxes, payments demanded from street-level drug dealers and gang members in exchange for permission to operate. These payments supported incarcerated members, funded legal defense efforts, and reinforced the authority of the organization. Refusal carried consequences, and enforcement was swift. What made Martinez particularly effective was his ability to balance restraint with control. He was not known for constant or reckless directives. Instead, his leadership style emphasized consistency. Orders were clear, expectations were understood. This approach reduced chaos and reinforced loyalty among those who depended on structure to survive. Within the Mexican Mafia's internal hierarchy, Pelican Bay housed some of the most influential figures in the system. Decisions made there rippled outward across California. Martinez, though not always the most visible, was becoming a dependable operator within that circle. His standing grew not through spectacle, but through reliability. Isolation, ironically, strengthened his position. Removed from street-level conflict and day-to-day exposure, Martinez could focus on strategy. He relied on others to execute instructions, insulating himself from direct involvement while maintaining oversight. This distance provided a layer of protection and longevity that many street leaders never achieved. Law enforcement agencies struggled with this reality. The SHU was supposed to dismantle command structures. Instead, it forced them underground where they became harder to track. Kites were intercepted occasionally, but many slipped through. When messages were found, they often appeared vague or innocuous, masking their true intent. Martinez's continued influence demonstrated a broader truth about prison-based organizations. Authority was not tied to freedom of movement. It was tied to trust, communication, and fear of consequences. As long as those elements remained intact, leadership could persist, even in near-total isolation. By the mid-2000s, Martinez had become more than a regional figure tied to one street gang. He was part of a wider operational network that connected state prisons, county jails, and neighborhood crews into a single functioning system. His name carried weight, even among individuals who had never met him face to face. The longer he remained confined, the more entrenched his role became. Younger members entering the system learned quickly who held influence. Orders attributed to Martinez were followed without question. His authority was reinforced not through visibility, but through results. Pelican Bay had not silenced him. It had refined him. And as fate would have it, a major shift in Southern California's jail system was about to open the door to Martinez's most powerful chapter yet, one that would move his influence closer than ever to the streets without him ever leaving custody. By 2007, the balance of power inside the Los Angeles County jail system was shifting. The nation's largest jail network had long been a critical hub for prison-based organizations. Unlike state prisons, county jails were fluid environments. Inmates moved in and out rapidly. New arrivals came directly from the streets, while others transitioned to state custody. Information flowed constantly, making the jails a strategic crossroads between inside leadership and outside operations. At the center of that system had been Michael Torres, a respected Mexican Mafia figure who oversaw many of the jail-based rackets. When Torres was transferred to state prison in 2007, a vacuum formed almost overnight. Control of the jail system was too important to remain leaderless. Decisions had to be made quickly, disputes settled, and revenue streams protected. That vacuum, according to investigators, was filled by Eulalio Lalo Martinez. Despite being physically removed from the county jails, Martinez was uniquely positioned to take control. His reputation was already established. He had proven his ability to manage operations remotely from Pelican Bay. More importantly, he was trusted. Within an organization where betrayal carried severe consequences, trust was everything. Martinez's assumption of control marked a turning point. Under his direction, the jail system operated with remarkable efficiency. Law enforcement later described it as a well-oiled machine. Drugs moved through housing units. Money flowed outward through intermediaries. Rules were enforced internally, minimizing chaos that could draw unwanted attention. Inside the jails, Martinez's influence was felt through layers of leadership. Shot callers relayed instructions to floor representatives, who managed daily activities within their units. New inmates were quickly assessed, categorized, and either integrated or isolated based on their affiliations. Compliance was expected, and deviation was dealt with swiftly. One of Martinez's key strengths was his ability to manage conflict. The jail system was a volatile environment, crowded with rival gangs, personalities, and shifting alliances. Unchecked violence brought lockdowns, transfers, and investigations, outcomes that disrupted business. Martinez prioritized stability. Disputes were resolved through internal channels whenever possible, reinforcing the idea that order benefited everyone involved. At the same time, revenue generation continued. Drug trafficking inside the jails remained a central operation. Payments collected from these activities were laundered through outside associates, then redistributed to support incarcerated members, families, and legal defense funds. This financial structure reinforced loyalty and ensured long-term sustainability. Martinez also had to fend off internal challenges. Leadership within the Mexican Mafia was never static. Ambitious figures watched for weakness, hoping to expand their own influence. Martinez's response was calculated rather than confrontational. By maintaining consistent operations and avoiding unnecessary exposure, he left little room for rivals to justify a change in leadership. From the perspective of street gangs, Martinez's authority became increasingly clear. Orders coming from the jail system carried weight because they were enforced consistently. Those who complied were allowed to operate. Those who did not found themselves isolated or facing consequences through affiliated crews. For law enforcement, the scope of Martinez's influence was difficult to fully map. The county jails were designed to hold people temporarily. Yet under Martinez's oversight, they functioned as permanent command centers. Inmates who stayed only days or weeks carried messages back to the streets, unintentionally extending his reach. Between 2007 and 2013, Martinez presided over the system at its most stable and profitable. He was not physically present in the jails he controlled, but his authority was unquestioned. Decisions made in his cell shaped the daily realities of thousands of inmates and countless street-level operations across Southern California. This period represented the peak of Martinez's power. He had successfully bridged the gap between maximum security state prison and local jail operations, creating a seamless flow of control. Few figures in the organization managed such breadth without direct exposure. Yet, with influence came attention. Federal and local investigators watched closely, gathering fragments of communication and testimony. The longer Martinez remained in control, the more likely it became that past actions would resurface. And they did. As Martinez approached a potential release date, events from years earlier, long thought settled, returned to the forefront, threatening to dismantle everything he had built. By 2010, after years of operating as a central figure within the Mexican Mafia's prison and jail network, Eulalio Lalo Martinez found himself facing an unfamiliar prospect: the possibility of release. He had served approximately 15 years on a robbery conviction, and under normal circumstances, his time in custody was nearing its end. For someone who had spent decades behind bars, the idea of stepping outside the system, of losing direct access to the structures he controlled, was both significant and uncertain. It was at this precise moment that the past resurfaced. Prosecutors in Los Angeles announced new charges against Martinez, accusing him of ordering the 1998 killing of Donald Pato Schubert. The case had lingered for years, unresolved and largely dormant. Now, more than a decade later, it was being revived with renewed urgency. The timing was impossible to ignore. According to investigators, Schubert had been targeted as an act of retaliation. Prosecutors alleged that Martinez believed Schubert was connected to a man who had been responsible for the death of Martinez's brother years earlier. From their perspective, the alleged order had been issued not from the streets, but from Martinez's cell inside Pelican Bay State Prison. A clear example of long-distance control, the case became emblematic of a larger strategy. Law enforcement agencies had long struggled to disrupt prison-based leadership. Bringing fresh charges tied to historical cases offered a way to neutralize figures whose influence could not easily be curtailed through administrative measures alone. If Martinez could not be isolated into irrelevance, he could be kept behind bars indefinitely. Prosecutors relied on testimony, intercepted communications, and patterns of behavior to build their argument. They painted Martinez as a man whose reach extended far beyond his physical confinement, someone capable of authorizing serious acts without ever leaving his cell. The narrative fit neatly with what investigators already believed about his role inside the system. For Martinez, the charges represented a sudden and total reversal. After years of maintaining control from within, he now faced the prospect of spending the rest of his life fighting a case that reached back more than a decade. Any hope of release vanished overnight. The legal battle also sent shockwaves through the jail and prison network he oversaw. Leadership uncertainty created tension. Associates wondered who might step in if Martinez was permanently removed. Rivals quietly assessed whether the moment was right to assert themselves. Despite this pressure, Martinez reportedly remained composed. Those familiar with his leadership style described him as methodical, someone who understood that panic created vulnerability. From custody, he continued to communicate, reinforcing stability and discouraging opportunistic challenges. The case drew attention precisely because it illustrated the difficulty of prosecuting prison-based figures. Evidence was often indirect, witnesses were reluctant, communications were coded. Yet prosecutors believed the broader pattern told a clear story. Martinez had been a decision-maker at the highest level. As pretrial proceedings unfolded, Martinez was transferred to Los Angeles County Jail, placing him physically inside the very system he had controlled for years. The irony was unmistakable. Even as an accused defendant awaiting trial, his presence carried weight. Word of his arrival spread quickly through the facility. Outside the jail, the case was framed as a long overdue reckoning. Inside, it was seen as a critical moment of transition. Martinez's future, and by extension the balance of power, hung in the balance. Then, before a jury could hear the evidence, events took an unexpected turn. In 2013, while still awaiting trial, Eulalio Lalo Martinez was found unresponsive in his cell. Authorities later ruled his death an accidental heroin overdose. The case against him would never reach a verdict. His sudden death closed one chapter, but opened many questions. It ended the prosecution, but it did not end the system he had helped shape. Control of the jail network shifted almost immediately, ensuring continuity. The man who had built an empire from isolation would never walk free. Instead, his story would end exactly where it had unfolded for decades, behind bars. The death of Eulalio Lalo Martinez in 2013 brought an abrupt and quiet end to one of the most influential prison-based careers in Southern California history. There was no trial, no verdict, and no public reckoning. Instead, his story concluded in the same controlled environment where it had unfolded for decades, a jail cell, far removed from the streets his decisions had shaped. Officially, Martinez's death was ruled an accidental heroin overdose. Within the Los Angeles County Jail, the news spread quickly, but without surprise. Long-term incarceration carried its own risks, and sudden losses were an accepted reality of the system. For those who had operated under Martinez's authority, the immediate concern was not how he died, but what would happen next. In prison-based organizations, power rarely remains vacant for long. Within hours and days, leadership channels adjusted. Control of the Los Angeles County Jail operations shifted to another Mexican Mafia figure, Jose Fox Landa Rodriguez. The transition was swift, deliberate, and largely seamless, an outcome that reflected the very system Martinez had helped reinforce. Roles were already defined. Protocols were already in place. Continuity mattered more than disruption. From an operational standpoint, little changed. Drug distribution routes adapted. Financial pipelines remained intact. Communication methods continued, refined by years of experience navigating surveillance and isolation. To outside observers, Martinez's death might have seemed like a decisive blow. Inside the system, it was treated as a managerial change. Martinez's legacy was not built on personality or public presence. It was built on structure. He had demonstrated that control did not require physical proximity. Authority could be maintained through layered leadership, consistent enforcement, and disciplined communication. These principles survived him. For law enforcement, his death was both an end and a frustration. The revived Schubert case would never be tested in court. Allegations would remain allegations. The opportunity to publicly dismantle a high-ranking figure vanished with him. Yet the investigation had already revealed something deeper: the resilience of prison-based networks. Martinez's career illustrated a fundamental challenge within the criminal justice system. Facilities designed to incapacitate leadership often became hubs of coordination instead. Long sentences removed individuals from public view, but did not necessarily remove their influence. In some cases, they concentrated it. From Barrio Lomas Rosemead to Pelican Bay, from isolated cells to the heart of the Los Angeles County jail system, Martinez had navigated every level of confinement without losing relevance. His authority outlasted transfers, restrictions, and near-total isolation. It only ended with his death, and even then, it did not truly disappear. The system continued, adapting as it always had. New names replaced old ones. Orders continued to move through indirect channels. Street gangs remained tethered to prison leadership. The cycle endured. Eulalio Lalo Martinez never achieved notoriety in the public eye. He did not seek attention. His influence was quiet, calculated, and almost entirely unseen by those outside the system. Yet for years, his decisions shaped lives, movements, and conflicts across Southern California. His story serves as a reminder that power does not always announce itself. Sometimes it exists in silence, in handwritten notes passed hand to hand, in decisions made from behind steel doors, and in systems that persist long after the men who built them are gone.